Hey, welcome in. I'm Rita, and this is the story I'm telling myself. If you've ever felt like you're standing in your own way, you are not alone. Let's get into it. Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Story I'm Telling Myself podcast. We have Mike Dwyer with us today. Mike, welcome. We're so excited to have you with us.
Thank you, Rita.
And if you are joining us live for this episode, welcome. We love having you with us. We love that you are with us in the comments. So please jump in, introduce yourself, and welcome Mike to the show as Mike gives us a little intro about himself. Mike, tell our listeners who you are.
Well, thank you, Rita. Just very briefly, after a very long career, international work, being an expat in Bermuda, flying all over the world, Ernst& Young, Deloitte. Over the last 15 years, there's been a sideline. Implana career has grown as a sideline that's ever more active and very important to me, and it's my way of giving back. So I think that's probably enough.
Yeah, because we're going to get into a lot of your story as we really unlock this idea that you are bringing to our listeners today of really changing your relationship with being uncomfortable. Hey, Gary, I see you there. Welcome to the show. So, implanacareer.com, and we have that in the notes for you guys that are up with us live, and they will be in the show notes as well. And that is how you can hook up with Mike to learn more about him and his work and what he does. So let's get right into this conversation, Mike, because your passion, your focus, what you're doing right now in the what's probably going to be the final career of your life, I'm guessing, is you are helping people in their career journey. But this goes all the way back to your experience very early on in your career when you found yourself in a very uncomfortable situation, feeling like the outsider who didn't belong. Tune our listeners into this story, walk them in, and tell them about that experience.
Well, and I think this is not an uncommon one where, we're all trained to work hard and get degrees. And, by the time I was in my 40s, I had this basically limitless job as a global vice president, big signing authority. I found out during my tenure I could create non officer positions as needed. But at some point, this whole 100-mile-an-hour thing, you finally get a job that's so big you wonder, am I doing all of it? And then I think too, what happens is, if you don't come out of prep schools, let me give you a very graphic example. I come from inner city schools and triple deckers in Somerville, Mass, before it was gentrified and before there was Starbucks. And I can remember going off to Phillips Exeter Academy for one summer, and I was so out of my league. These were the sons and daughters of princes, literally. And my dad runs surgery at Chicago, and this sort of thing. So I think, as I do career work, and this is why I'm so aligned with what you're doing as this opportunity to talk. Um, our biography can be outstrapped by our progress, and we can find ourselves, wondering, "Am I okay? What should I do?" And that's the context that I bring to you, Rita.
Yeah, and I can really relate to what you're saying, Mike, because I grew up in West Virginia, which is considered one of the poorest and most rural states in the United States. And the perception that so many people have is that I'm going to be undereducated, that I'm going to have a certain kind of accent. All of these kinds of things. And so, similarly, I was the first one in my family to go to college and graduate. And so I found myself when I entered college and then post college, when I entered the workforce, being hesitant to talk about where I was from, my background, because my perception was that people would have a certain bias
All right.
about me that was based on that. You, highly successful, found yourself in an international position leading a company, but you had this moment when you realized you were surrounded by all these people that were yacht owners and
Yeah,
um,
I
you
did a
know,
jet
avid
boat.
golfers, and sort of lived in this what I would call a luxury lifestyle,
Right.
that sort of went with achieving this level of success in terms of their corporate identity, and you didn't really have that. Tell our listeners a little bit about the story that you were telling yourself at that time and how you were able to navigate that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, no, and the setting is where, to give you a humorous little data point, I realized I had to buy a tuxedo. You know what I mean? That there was enough philanthropic events and things were always happening at the yacht club, and I'm not a golfer, and I'm living in Bermuda, and some
And hanging
people
out
were.
with people that have probably owned a tuxedo since they were in like high school or something, right? I mean, like that was something standard that hung out in their wardrobe.
Well, and since you're encouraging me, I'm going to offer you a very particular element of biography. Um, I had 700 college boards, and so someone might mistake and think I'm bragging. No, twice in my life, I've spent 6 or 7 years where everyone else had 800 college boards. And that
Hmm.
was part of the Bermuda setting. First, when I was younger in a software house, and then later where there's just these deeply capable and poised people all around me. And so at first there was no conscious awareness. There was just some discomfort, but then I sort of got to work. And the worker bee ethic says, well, let me join the Bermuda Insurance Institute. That's a sidetrack thing that is a healthy activity. It's I can contribute, I can give back, I can get to know people. Um, One of the other things that I did that you and I talked and touched on briefly is I put together a peer group, and I got a little bold. I got the CIO of Bacardi, who is Bacardi's headquartered in Hamilton, Bermuda. I got the founder of Hyperion, the data warehousing software. Put together 3 or 4 of us, and we get together, and somehow just listening to others and seeing their humanity, all that somehow all those pieces came together. Um, is there
And
anything I should
so,
add at this point? Please, yeah.
yeah, well, so what I want to get into is I want to get into that internal narrative, but I want to welcome Lisa. Hey, Lisa, welcome back. I'm so happy to see you in the show again today. So you have this moment of recognizing that your humble beginnings did not match you've been in this situation before, as you indicated, when you were younger and feeling kind of out of place. And what happens so much of the time when we feel really out of place is our automatic response to that is retraction. Mike, it's withdrawal, self protection of
Mhm.
ego. So we pull back. But you're talking about doing something different. You're talking about when you're feeling that discomfort of I'm not one of these people. I don't really I don't match. I'm the one thing there that doesn't look like everything else around me. You said, well, I guess I've got to figure out how to look that way. You bought the tuxedo and said, I'm going to go to the philanthropic events and do the hobnobbing thing
Right.
that is expected of somebody in my position. I'm going to go out into the business community and I am going to become an active member in the business community. And not only that, I'm going to create my own table where I'm inviting the people around the table who are joining me. There's a shift that had to happen that allowed you to tell yourself a different story. What was the story that you started to tell yourself that allowed you to move away from just acknowledging that you didn't belong and allowing yourself to activate in terms of becoming somebody who does belong instead of holding on to the story, I don't?
Well, Rita, I would have loved to have a cup of coffee with you all those years ago. Okay. But you weren't there. And so I wish I could hold up some sort of, um, intellectual or psychological triumph. Instead, what I said is, I would say is that those kinds of things you ticked off, sort of the taking the worker bee ethic and pushing yourself into some things, started to slowly pay dividends. Um,
Mm.
and
So you
so
took some
then
risk. You were just enough of a risk taker to say, I'm gonna put myself out there, and then you started to see payoff.
exactly, and I'm going to take you fast forward to the experience I had that really pulled all this together. So first I worked for Ernst and Young in Bermuda for a few years, and then I was fortunate enough. One of the partners left and was heading up a big part of the risk company, of a reinsurance company, and I was asked to be head of technology worldwide. And you know, uh, that's where I was sort of doing this shakedown stuff and doing some growth. But then what happened is we went through a merger with a huge part, another part of the Zurich Financial Group in Europe, and this thing was just so vast. I mean, at the end of 15 months, it was unmerged at the cost of $100 million to the two balance sheets. So that gives you a sense of scale. And you know what happened? One fine morning, I'm sitting there, and really no one knows what to do after a merger. And I thought,
True.
and finally I got to a point, all those incremental things. I actually said to myself, look, I got a title, I got a master's degree, I have a signing authority, I got people reporting to me. And what I decided I was going to do is whatever happened during the day, the next morning, I was going to do whatever I was afraid of. That's
Oh,
literally
wow.
the most relevant thing I can say to you. And I'll tell you what, if you do whatever you're afraid of for 6 months, there's two things that's going to happen. First of all, like any muscles, they grow and what you're afraid of drops. And the second thing is, was a vast financial organization. I mean, sometimes you get an email from home office that involved changing the world or compliance issues that were so pervasive. And this other business of let me take a cut at it, let me do whatever. I started to get feedback saying you're the only one who answered.
Mm.
So between those two things, that's really what I'd like to share with your listeners, that you can make a conscious decision to say,
Yeah.
tomorrow morning, I'm going to do not what's the most urgent, not this or that or who I want to talk to. I'm going to do what I'm afraid of. And that just, I never look back. I've never been as afraid of
Wow, how
anything.
powerful, Mike. I mean, that is very powerful. And it can be and so it doesn't have to be huge either,
No,
right?
it could just be difficult. But and somebody corrected me one time. I was talking to them. It was actually a CEO, and he played back to me. So you did whatever is hardest, and I corrected him. No, Bob, I did what I was afraid of, and that was worthwhile.
I love that. So really, but it requires a certain level of self-reflection and honesty with self in order to do that.
Well, and then things start getting pretty complex because this starts to fold in your view of work, your view of responsibility as a manager or an executive. Don't I have duty to try and look out for the people around me? And shouldn't I come through and do my best? And so if you fold all that together, the way I formulate it is to say, if I do whatever I'm afraid of at the start of every single day, yeah, I know I'm going to be making some serious progress.
So what were some of the things that you learned about yourself or the story of fear that you had been carrying with you, Mike, as you went on that journey to say every day, I'm going to start the day, I'm going to do one thing I fear.
Well, it turns out it doesn't have to be perfect. Sometimes, like I said, I would get feedback months later from somebody saying, "You are the only one who answered."
Mhm.
And I think that speaks for itself. Take a cut at it. I mean, think a minute. If it's something enough to make you scared, then yeah, it's either a complex HR issue or it's a complex compliance issue, so sure, think a little bit. Don't be rash, but take a cut at it. Give it your best shot. That's really what I'd say.
Well, and it sounds like part of what you learned is even if it wasn't a perfect, even if you didn't get it absolute 100% right, the world also didn't fall apart. You know,
There's that.
I remember in my years in human resources, I had many and many of the same conversation over and over again with an upset employee who would come to me and would say, I can't. Whatever it was that they wanted to say or do or were feeling passionate about. And I would say, what's stopping you? And they said, well, I'll get fired. And I said, oh, you will. So you really think you'd lose your job if you said to your boss, you know, I really don't agree that this is the best course of action. Well, yeah, I probably wouldn't get fired, but you know, it's going to come up. I'm going to make him mad. It's going to come up in my review. It's going to hurt me for my paycheck. It's going to hurt, you know, but so fear, we have these stories that we tell ourselves when we feel threatened. And our internal self so much wants to protect us that you know, it will really magnify the biggest boogeyman possible in it oftentimes. And the truth is that is a very minor possibility compared to all the other outcomes that could come. But we latch on to that. And again, it's a protection. It's a self-protection mechanism that we have. So what other practices? I mean, now you've moved forward in your career. You've taken what you've learned, you've turned that into a business, and you actually coach and help people in their careers. What tips can you share with our listeners around what other practices they can do to help them be more comfortable with being in their discomfort?
Well, I think putting an advisory. I'm a really sold on the idea of a personal board. And once again, surprise, surprise, you don't have to get it right the first time. In fact, well, some of the things I tell people about putting a personal board together is consider it a trial. Maybe this isn't the permanent one. That's okay too. Because if you think about it, what you did in those difficult HR situations was you played sounding board and guide that made people realize, well, actually, you know what? I wouldn't get fired. I mean, and so then what happens is then you start being a little bit objective, and the discomfort is something that says, well, is this holding me back? Do I want to be
Yes.
held back? And I think we're onto a good thing here, Rita.
Well, I think you just hit the core of everything. When do you know that it's time to face those fears and take action? One key indicator of that is when it's starting to disrupt your ability to have the life that you want. You know, when it's disrupting that is the bad signal, friends. That is the bad signal that you need to be paying attention to, that it is time for action.
I love it. And, you know, the human condition being what it is, I try and help some of the younger people I work with and say, look, if you said something you shouldn't have, go apologize, get over it, you know, but this isn't what we're talking about. We're talking about something that's running deeper, that, you know, where a fear or an avoidance is becoming material, as the auditors say. It's impacting you and what you can do. In that case, you want to address it. And
Well,
even
and
if
I
you,
love the work that Becky Kennedy does.
oh, it's
And
pray
if you're
tell.
not following her on LinkedIn, because she's starting to not only talk about parenting, but also showing a lot of the parallels, which I've been teaching her work to my clients for quite a while. But this idea of repair. So what if you make a mistake? Just
Right.
you can repair. Again, it's a fear story that's holding us back, that we tell ourselves, well, I can't take the risk because if I make a mistake, that's it for me. And no, it's not that's it for me. The repair is a process that you can do, and it can allow you to more freedom embracing Becky Kennedy's teachings of repair will give you more freedom to take more risk, to move into those spaces where you are feeling very uncomfortable, because it's a safety net that you need.
I'll check. I want to follow up on that. It's a great lead, but certainly the idea. Sometimes when I see people struggling with something, I'll say to them, a lot of times, business and even life is like a pitching machine. You might have missed that ball, but if you turn around and look at the one you missed, guess what's going to happen? There's another one coming. So, stay with it. If you need to apologize, if you need to make amends or something, do that work. But whenever inaction is seldom the right course. Once in a while, you just got to let someone talk and share with you or something, and not try and be directive. I think we've all learned that. But broadly, inaction is seldom the right course. And so I like this, where we're finding our way through how can I get unstuck, really, right?
Right, right. Yeah, absolutely. So when people are caught in the story that they find themselves on happening on repeat, because this is how our internal narrator works, she doesn't ever shut up, and she's just going. You hear her in the quiet car drive, in the shower, just running the things through your head. When you hear that voice on repeat saying, well, you can't do that, no, you can't do that, I think there's probably an opportunity for you to shift that conversation a little bit. When you're hearing that in your head, Mike, and to me, that is a signal of you're hitting one of those comfort boundaries that may be pushing into that discomfort zone. What is it what questions do you ask yourself to enable you to find a path forward?
I wished I could tell you it was this kind of work. I was always very intentional and organized about it. But I think sometimes just instinctively, you just say to yourself, I'm stuck and I'm going to just get unstuck. Let me take a cut at
Mm.
this. Um, and because if you think about all the things we just talked about, if you reduce the risk by saying to yourself, well, and if I don't do it perfectly, I can always revisit, repair, talk to somebody. Um, if you get yourself, if you decide that you don't want to be stuck, and just come from there, I think it's a good thing. And now, I'm over 65 now, and I do some work with seniors. And one of the things I love is the filters. When you're in a room full of seniors talking about careers, the filters are gone. It's hilarious. You know what I mean? um, and so I think you get more comfortable in your own skin, um, and and you get used to the idea that you certainly better be used to the idea that others have important ideas and can contribute, and you want to collaborate and learn. So if you put all those things together, there's a whole lot of ways to get unstuck.
So your first experience with the advisory board was sort of that mastermind group that you created, where you had the CIO, Bacardi, et cetera, around you. And it was really about you trying to build a network of people around you that you could learn from, that could help you understand and make sense of things that you were encountering as a new executive, that maybe they had encountered before. So for people who want to take your suggestion to heart about thinking about their own advisory board,
Yes.
what tips do you have for how do you begin to think about and select people to include in your advisory board?
Well, happily, once again, it doesn't have to be perfect. Um, what you're looking for is feedback. So you don't want you want some people who know you pretty well. In fact, I was talking about a personal board with someone at my co-working space who I just admire. They're almost a fiery person. They're very cool. They're very thoughtful, but they're action oriented. And they were saying, a person or two on your personal board or advisory board might not even know what you do for a living, but they know you, and they know when you're being timid and when you're stretching enough for somebody to say to you, this isn't going to be that easy for you. And really, so I think what you're looking for in a board is most of us are in a kind of a grounded by reality, right? We want to succeed in our sector, whether it's insurance or real estate, whatever, whatever our education, whatever our sector is. I mean, ideally, you want to get somebody who knows, who has some presence in your field, but you'd also like to have someone who's good at giving feedback and helping to shape and sequence. And I'll tell you a place I see this. When I work with the people through the university career office I mentioned, I get a lot of MBAs and grad students, and they're brutal on themselves. I mean, they think they have to do everything this week. And I mean, literally, like I need, you know, I know European accounting, I need to learn GAAP. I mean, massive things and one of the things a personal board can do for you is sort of carburate or meter and help shape. Yeah, you could use some more of that skill, or, you probably do want to test your wings there a little bit, but help you make sure you're not trying to do everything at once also. So I think that you're shopping. And I think that, by the way, whenever I'm working with people, I'm looking for that sound. Do you ever hear someone say, huh? It's that kind of human sound that says, I'm a little bit intrigued. That sounds possible. So I'm hoping that people start looking around in what I think is a very healthy way, and approaching people and say, would you be willing to meet once a month, once a quarter? Get some people together that add perspectives about your business or sector, about technology, but certainly be in a position to give the kind of feedback. You're an organizational psychologist and you've had a long HR at all levels. So you're used to feedback, but not everyone is. And I think I would encourage people to seek that out.
Well, and I think it's important what you're saying. In today's society, we are much more accustomed to an echo chamber of surrounding ourselves with people who affirm us. And it is good to have people in your board who think a lot like you. But what you are also saying is, but that is insufficient. You also have to have the people that'll challenge you. You have to have the
Absolutely.
friend who will tell you the truth no matter what, that will tell you that outfit looks like crap on you, girl, don't waste your time, right? You need those people that are going to be very direct and help you challenge yourself if what you want to do is really push yourself beyond your comfort zone. Mike, when you were talking, it was reminding me of a conversation probably around the same time last year, that hit with my friend Sabrina Victoria. So I don't know the episode right now. Maybe I can tag it for you guys in the show notes. But Sabrina, the title of her episode was "Go Bigger?" question mark. And her whole philosophy, much like what you're saying, is that our automatically response when we start to visualize possibility is, as soon as we start to get past that margin of comfort, we start to question, oh, is that too much? Maybe I should back down. Maybe I should. And she's like, no, that's the time to like stomp on the gas pedal and like zoom even further out there and go like even bigger. What would even bigger be like? Because
Right.
once you visualize what even bigger could be, that first step that you looked at is going to feel so easy. And so just like you were saying about, you just start practicing, you do one thing that you're afraid of every day, and pretty soon you change your relationship with stepping into your fear. And she's saying to push yourself into even bigger, fearful ideas about possibility, because then the first step is not going to feel so monumental.
This is wonderful. And another thing a personal board does is bring you some judgment, because not all of us are meant to be. Look, when I came back from being that global executive, I think I was expected to be a CIO somewhere. I didn't want to. I ended up doing. Had my own business for a long time. I've done some really interesting VP level work at boutique consulting firms. There was a little part of me that said, okay, I did that. I want to do some other things. I have some people I want to play with and the like. So one of the things I like about this conversation, Rita, is if we can take the wisdom you just described about being ready to go bigger, then if we decide not to do that, it's not because of fear. It's because we found something that might actually be truer for us. And that's where it's
Yes.
at.
That is where it's at. That is exactly where it's at. Well, Mike, this has been a fabulous conversation. I feel like that's a very strong place for us to end, unless people have questions that they want to put into the comments section. King, I see that you got here. Thanks for joining us. Any final words of wisdom you would like to share with our listeners about how they can challenge themselves to shift their relationship with discomfort in their life?
Well, first of all, take on some part of it as soon as you can. Tomorrow morning's a good start. And I think for all of us, getting used to the idea of feedback and asking for it and really wanting it is itself a discomfort that is worth overcoming.
Oh, that is a good one. That is a good one. All right, friends. Thank you for joining us for this conversation with Mike Dwyer. Don't forget, this will be out on Thursday. This is a fabulous episode to share with your friends. And so a great way to do that is go over to the podcast platforms and just share it directly from there. And then come back again next week. And I wish I could remember, but it'll be another fabulous conversation next week, whoever my guest is. Sorry, I don't have that teed up at the moment, but I look forward to having you back with us again. Thank you, friends, for joining us in the comments. It's great to have you with us live, and we'll see you back next week. Everybody have a good week. Thanks. Bye. Thanks for joining us. If you love this episode, leave us those 5 stars and be sure to share this with a friend. And if you didn't, don't worry about it. See you back here next week.